Okay, my second one is probably one that recent buyers of houses is not going to like, but I predict that property prices in the UK will fall by 8 to 10% by the end of the year. So
that was on my list.
Why? So I've gone through all. Well, we can agree. We can agree and have different theses.
Go on,
so. Look, all of the UK house builders, I've read through all the reports this afternoon, they've all reported sales cycles pretty much doubling. Some of them have gone ahead and started talking about inevitable dividend cuts. Some of them have already cut dividends. So I think there's threefold problems here. Interest rates are not going to be accommodative. Help to Buy is finished, and cost of living is soaring, both in terms of utility bills and food. So I don't think there's going to be oversupply, though. So I think it's going to temper the fall a little bit. I think house builders of all sizes are not building as much as they were going to. I think the BOE is going to have rates risen to such a degree that the UK, which is already a fragile economy, is going to fall into recession. And I think this is going to lead to a pretty large bump in unemployment, which is going to further slow the market down. So my additional gamble is that this will actually be what causes the Conservative Party to collapse, and I think we will have a general election called for 2024 by the end of 2023. I like to add this little sparkle at the end of my predictions, which makes it even harder to get right.
I was going to say, so your prediction is the 8% fall in housing or the collapse of the Conservative Party? Because
I think the 8 to 10% fall is going to be the final straw that's dissolved this current Conservative Party. But my bet is my thing that I want credit on is the fall of property prices.
Yeah, I had this on my list myself. I had 8% in my head as well, and I thought this was one of the easier ones to do because I went down to my local estate agent earlier, and there are a lot of houses on the market right now for particularly less than they were a couple of months ago, if I'm honest. And I'm a bit annoyed at this one. This is the less hopeful one for me because I've just paid off quite a bit of my house at a premium. So I have full equity. Well, I have a lot of equity in my house now, but I do think that value of the house is going to come down.
Yeah,
I had 8% in my head as well. I think 10% is a lot, but I think 8% is very, very reasonable.
Good. So we're working towards some at least nebulous form of disagreement here because I have written down house prices down 10% at some point this year as one of mine. I have a slightly different view to certainly Steve on this situation. I'm concerned, when we think about those companies that have loads of debt on their balance sheets and interest rates going up means that they're going to have to pay more on that debt and it's not clear they can afford to service it, and that's going to cut right across their profitability and stuff. I think that's going to happen with humans. Basically, interest rates are going up, people's mortgages are going to come off their fixed things gradually, and if they were at a level where they took out their mortgages when rates were nearly zero or in real terms negative, and they were leveraged as far as they could manage on this, it's going to be a lot harder with rates going up. And I think that might catch some people by surprise because they were expecting to just refinance at 2% or something like that again, and they ain't going to be able to refinance at 2%, and I think that's going to be a problem. So I'm expecting a bit more housing inventory to come onto the market in ways that I don't particularly view as positive, but I just don't like the number of people that I think are on debt they can barely afford in this particular property market and are in trouble with a rate rise move just back to what would be a historic average, let alone anything particularly high at the moment.
Agreed. I don't think people are prepared for this. Anecdotally, do you have any friends that you feel like are in a bit of a situation where they've not prepared for a situation like this?
I don't have any friends, so I'll pass to Steve.
I know someone who I think is probably in trouble on this, basically. I mean, these are just kind of ordinary people, right, who aren't particularly listening to finance podcasts, let alone making them. And 4 years ago, that would have been me, if you just kind of wander into your bank or mortgage advisor or whatever and say, look, how much can I get lent for this thing? And they'll say this, and it'll be this much for 3 years. And you think, can I manage that? Yeah, I can manage that. Where will interest rates be in 3 years' time? Oh, who knows, right? Because that's actually quite hard to call where interest rates will be in 2 or 5 years' time or something. And then I mean, you need to, if you, a quick look at a chart of where interest rates have been historically would have told you that 2 years ago they were extremely low, and they were unlikely to be that low for any prolonged period of time, despite some people saying that, oh yes, it's a new paradigm and so on, because interest rates that low is always going to bring about inflation. But look, I think there are people that I know that just don't have that bunch of thoughts, and I want to say partly that they should, because it's their mortgage. They should know what they're getting into here. I also want to say they've been failed quite badly by a system that doesn't really present this stuff to them. The education system that they've been through and that I've been through, that never talked about mortgages and interest rates and so on and so forth, at least as far as I can remember anyway.
Yeah, and that's the problem, isn't it? I think a lot of people have not been taught this. They've only really know what they've experienced, and what they've experienced is the fact that they can get a mortgage, even with very little deposit on a house, for maybe 1 or 2 or 3%, and that house price goes up. Now the opposite is true, in that rates are now at 6 and 7 and 8%, and house prices could be potentially going down. Now, negative equity is a real problem, especially if it comes to remortgaging. The people who put 5% down on a house, and then house prices fall 10, even if they fall 20%, next time when it comes down to remortgage, you're in a lot of trouble. So I think it's a problem, and I think it's a problem that's it may not unwind itself next year. I think it'll unwind itself next year. I think we could be potentially out of it. I think it might be lagging a little bit, but I think by the end of the year, I think house prices could be in serious trouble. I
want to give you a bit of a left field view of this. Not that I ever give straight views of this, but I've noticed people in my, not in my social group as such, but people maybe that I experience in the day, during COVID, getting divorced. And I actually did a quick look at the divorce rates for the UK. In 2018, it was 7.6 divorces per 1,000, and in 2021, that's dramatically risen to 9.4 divorces per 1,000. This means a lot of people during the pandemic got bored of each other. That's number one, but also those people have also had to rush into high interest housing for themselves, and obviously that causes a huge strain on finances. And I think there's something in there. There's going to be a lot of people out there with different grades of this, not specifically divorces, but they've made certain decisions during the pandemic which will be negatively beneficial to them in 2021 onwards. So I believe that there are a lot of compounding forces that are going to come together to ultimately drive house prices down. Number one, because of high interest rates, no one wants to buy. And number two, like you say, I think there's going to be a bit of higher inventory because people are not going to be able to afford their mortgage. And they may take to personal finance information and decide that they need to downsize because they bought a 4-bed house when they can't afford it.
In a word, guys, and just because I know we're acutely aware of the time, in COVID we got our wages paid for us in a massive recession essentially caused by central banks. Is there a chance that the government pays your mortgage?
No,
not a chance. It's going to be downsize or downgrade, I think, is going to be the message, particularly if it's Conservative-led government. I do think so.